Hey, tonight we're going to replace our sneakers with kangaroo leather boots. Put our phones in flight mode, follow the Wi-Fi signal from 30,000 and go to the red center of Australia to decipher the circle of friends on the stone. But I'd like to remind you first that in this continent where sunscreen can melt, if you don't bring mosquito repellent, you may not survive the first day and be bitten like a walking meat pie. The fur on the kangaroo leather boots rubs your ankles and makes them itchy. You suddenly remember the Australian Uggs sold in the supermarket, which are now lying in your hiking bag next to the campfire. The handmade products on your feet carry your body temperature, and the leather texture is embedded with fine eucalyptus leaves. You squatted by the campfire and used a branch to stir the charcoal, sparks flying onto your cotton t-shirt, when you suddenly heard your guide, Old Jack, knocking his boot heel against a rusty iron bucket. This Aboriginal descendant, with a sandy beard, always said that eucalyptus juice flowed in his veins. At this moment, he was holding a flashlight that was almost out of battery and waving it at the rock wall. See those crooked lines that look like they were drawn by a giant with lipstick? This is the prehistoric circle of friends we are going to decipher tonight. It was posted probably by your great-grandmother's great-grandmother, 40,000 years ago. There was no photo editing software like you have now. It was all done by using a kangaroo hairbrush, dipped in emu egg liquid, to mix ochre. If you drew a crooked stroke, you had to wait for rain to wash it away for half a year. The moment the beam of light swept across the ochre-red rock wall, your pupils exploded with mottled ochre and snow white. The pigments made of kangaroo hair mixed with emu egg liquid, carved symbols on the quartz sandstone that are older than oracle bone script. The crooked, broken lines look like a squashed centipede, and the circle with triangle pattern reminds you of the children's puzzles sold in supermarkets. The weirdest thing is a spiral pattern similar to a Wi-Fi signal, facing the wind outlet of the cave. Whenever the night wind blows past, it will make a low whimper, which is very much like the sound of electricity when an old radio searches for channels. You can't help but reach out and touch it. The fingertips feel rough like sandpaper, and there is a faint mineral smell, as if the earth is greeting you in your palm. Mainstream historical knowledge point. At present, more than 100,000 rock art sites have been discovered in Australia, the oldest of which can be traced back to 45,000 years ago, thousands of years earlier than European cave paintings. These artworks created with ochre, charcoal and plaster constitute one of the oldest visual recording systems of mankind. Ochre comes from the fault of the Red Hills, charcoal is a treasure of campfire embers, and plaster is a treasure dug out from the cracks in the rock wall. Each pigment carries the fingerprint of the earth, and has a more breath-like feeling of traveling through thousands of years than modern acrylic paint. Old Jack suddenly taps you on the back of the head with a flashlight. Don't stare at the spiral pattern. It's an ancient navigation app. See the 3 rows of pits below the rock wall. During the rainy season, they are filled with rainwater, and the reflected light spots are just aimed at this symbol. Our ancestors were much smarter than you modern people who rely on mobile phone maps to get lost. They would observe the reflection of the moon on the water surface of the pits, just like you follow the arrows when you look at the mobile phone navigation. But their navigation system is waterproof and can be upgraded for free for 10,000 years. You touch the warm indentations on the rock wall, and suddenly find that the hand of a stickman pattern is particularly large, and there are small fish painted between the 5 fingers. Is this a prehistoric fishing talent show? I guess so, but it's more like a picture for a circle of friends. Old Jack took out a cowhide notebook and turned to the page with the eucalyptus leaf. The edge of the paper was frayed by the rain. Look at this big palm symbol. There are 12 variations in Kakadu National Park. Some have kangaroos on the palms, and some have rainbow snakes. The academic community is still arguing whether this is the artist's signature or some kind of "I was here" check-in mark. Maybe it's like the scissor hand gesture you're making in front of the Eiffel Tower now. But their scissor hand gesture can be preserved for 40,000 years. But your selfies can't survive the replacement of mobile phones. Little known fact: Australian Aborigines would use a short-handled axe, called waddy, to carve shallow grooves on the rock wall, and then fill them with ochre pigment. This pigment is rich in hematite, which not only prevents insects and corrosion, but also makes the pattern fluorescent under ultraviolet light, equivalent to the prehistoric version of luminous circle of friends. Imagine that on a full moon night, 40,000 years ago, the ancestors gathered around a campfire and watched the fluorescent palm prints on the rock wall gradually light up. That scene is much cooler than watching fluorescent tattoos when you are dancing in a nightclub and there is no deafening subwoofer. Just as you were about to get closer to take a photo, your feet suddenly slipped and you stepped into the soft soil. Looking down, you saw dense worker ants emerging from the flattened termite mound, like a handful of moving black pepper. Old Jack smiled with wrinkles all over his face. Congratulations, you have stepped into an ancient pigment processing factory. The acidic liquid secreted by these termites is a natural colorant. Our ancestors' acrylic paint all depended on the help of these little guys. Next time you see a termite mound, remember to walk around it. You might have stepped into a chemical workshop 40,000 years ago, and they haven't paid you the admission fee yet. Before you relax, please like and subscribe first. Of course, only if you really like my content. By the way, tell me in the comment section what time is it in your city right now. Maybe we can find the resonance of the moonlight 40,000 years ago in the time difference. For example, it is breakfast time at 7 o'clock in the morning where you are, and the rock wall here is covered with the same moonlight 40,000 years ago. Do you suddenly feel that time and space have become soft? When old Jack's flashlight beams swept across the Wi-Fi spiral pattern, for the third time, you suddenly noticed that there were smaller symbols hidden in the shadows of the rock wall, a row of crooked footprints leading deep into the cave, and stars were painted in each footprint like gold dust to guide night walkers. Old Jack suddenly lowered his voice. Do you know why archaeologists always come here at 3 in the morning? When the moon rises directly above the cave entrance, these star symbols will connect with the moonlight. Hush, let's talk about it tomorrow. Now, his voice was suddenly crushed by the night wind, and the sound of kangaroo claws scratching gravel came from afar, like someone quietly flipping through an ancient stone album. Now dim the lights, turn on a small fan as background music, and enter tonight's story. You can imagine yourself lying on a moisture-proof mat, listening to the crackling sound of the campfire, listening to the sound flowing like a lullaby, and listening to the prehistoric circle of friends on the rock wall, blinking at you across 40,000 years. You follow the footprints deeper into the cave, your sneakers making tiny noises as they step on the weathered sandstone, like someone sprinkling sugar in your ears, or like the ancient rock wall whispering a welcome. The flashlight beam suddenly hits a vertical rock wall, and you are almost scared to drop your device by the human face that comes towards you. It's a 3-meter-tall ochre-red human figure, with no mouth, eyes like 2 deep wells, eyelashes clearly outlined with white plaster, and radial lines around the top of the head, like a glowing crown of thorns, with a few tiny grains of quartz sand on the edge of the crown, glittering in the beam, like stars falling into a paint can. This is Wandjina, our rain god. Old Jack knocked on the rock wall with a branch, startling a few dormant fruit bats. They fluttered their wings over your head, and the wind they brought had a faint smell of rock powder. See the white stripes on his eyelashes? That's not pigment, but mineral deposits, left by thousands of years of rain infiltration. It's equivalent to thousands of years of tears. But we're happy when he cries. After all, the rainy season in the Australian interior depends on the sneezing of this mouthless thunder god. Look how round his eyes are, brighter than the eyes of modern people when you see a full signal on your mobile phone. Mainstream historical knowledge point. Wandjina is the most representative rock art image in the Kimberley region of northwest Australia. These mouthless gods usually have exaggerated eyes and radial headdresses, and are believed to be related to rain, thunder and lightning, and the creation of life. Archaeologists have found shells and animal bones used for ancient sacrifices around some Wandjina patterns. The shells still have tooth marks left by the ancestors, as if they can hear the murmurs as the sacrifice 40,000 years ago. The sound has traveled through time and is now hidden in the cracks of the rock wall. You look closer and find that the crown of the rain god is actually made up of countless tadpole-shaped symbols, with each tadpole's tail facing in different directions, like 1,000 paper cranes blown by the wind. Old Jack suddenly took out his mobile phone to play the sound of rain. The noise of raindrops hitting the speaker of the mobile phone unexpectedly coincided with the sound of dripping water in the cracks of the rock wall. Listen, these lines are not decorations, but meteorological satellite cloud maps. Modern meteorologists have found that the direction of the Wandjina headdress is exactly the same as the path of the Kimberley monsoon. Our ancestors have already carved the weather forecast on the stone, which is much more reliable than the mobile phone app you look at. At least it will not crash suddenly, and it can be used for free for 10th. Rainwater accumulates in the pit below the rock wall. You squat down and see that your reflection overlaps with Wandjina's. Suddenly you discover that the god's eyelashes are actually layered. The bottom layer is outlined with charcoal, just like a sketch made with twigs. The middle layer is painted with white paint mixed with gypsum, as white as the first snow in an Australian winter. The top layer actually has a layer of transparent propolis, which glows amber under the flashlight. Is this prehistoric waterproof mascara? You reach out and touch it lightly, and your fingertips feel a little bit of sticky substance, and there is a faint scent of honey, as if Uncle Wandjina had given himself a layer of natural highlighter. Smart. Old Jack snapped his fingers, startling a blue butterfly that had landed on the symbol. The light spots on its wings fell into Wandjina's eyes, like lighting a small lamp for the gods. The indigenous people would collect propolis from beehives and apply it on important rock paintings for waterproofing and sun protection. This method is much more environmentally friendly than applying sunscreen like you modern people. But a friendly reminder. He suddenly pointed at the traces of sunscreen on your t-shirt. If you rub chemical sunscreen on the rock paintings, Wandjina might let you experience 3 hours of heavy rain. Then you will know which is better, prehistoric waterproofing or modern waterproofing. Little known fact. In the Wandjina rock paintings in the Kimberley region, the bodies of some gods are actually naturally formed rock textures. Ancient artists would create along the cracks and spots of sandstone, such as using yellow rust spots to paint the beards of gods, blurring the boundaries between nature and human power, which can be called the earliest land art. Look at the rust on Wandjina's chin. It looks like a natural golden beard, much more fashionable than the grey hair you dye modern people, and it will never fade. You follow Wandjina's line of sight outside the cave and find that his gaze is facing the mountains in the distance, where there are several conical stone piles, like cakes stacked by a giant. Old Jack suddenly took out the GPS positioning, and the small red dot on the screen gently jumped on the map. See those stone cakes? Modern archaeological teams have dug up 40,000-year-old stone axes and charcoal below, and Wandjina's line of sight just forms a straight line. The academic community is still arguing whether this is a coincidence or part of the ancient navigation system. Maybe our ancestors have already used the eyes of the gods as Google Maps, and there are no pop-up ads. When you reach out to touch the symbol under Wandjina's feet, your fingertips suddenly touch raised particles. They are pigments mixed with quartz sand, which still hurt your hands after thousands of years. Like fingerprints left by time. Old Jack suddenly whispered, "Do you know why Wandjina has no mouth? In our legend, his voice is thunder and his breath is monsoon." So ancient artists did not draw a mouth, because no lines can describe the sound of nature. Unlike you modern people, who have to send 10 voice messages even when eating a bowl of instant noodles, and wish they could put all the sounds into their phones. The cry of a night owl came from outside the cave, and you suddenly noticed the radial lines on Wandjina's head, casting a fan-shaped shadow in the moonlight, just covering the sacrificial pit below the rock wall, like a blanket of light, covering the earth. Old Jack turned off the flashlight, Now imagine that on a rainy night 40,000 years ago, your ancestor stood here holding a burning torch. The flickering of the torch made Wandjina's eyelashes tremble, and the rain flowed into the sacrificial pit along his headdress, making a ding-dong sound. This is how our ancestors talked to the gods. It's much more ritualistic than sending voice messages on WeChat. Every drop of rain is a greeting, and every flame is a blink of an eye. You touch the deep and shallow marks on the rock wall, and suddenly realize that these symbols are not static pictures, but flowing stories. When old Jack turns on the flashlight again, you see a row of smaller handprints at Wandjina's feet. Raindrops are painted on each palm, and tiny shell fragments are embedded in the palm prints, as if ancient children hid their little secrets in the paint. Is it the graffiti of ancient children, or the practice of apprentices? Just like modern people's likes on WeChat moments, these marks spanning thousands of years are conveying proof of existence to the future in the most simple way, telling you we were here, dancing with the rain, talking with the rocks, and accompanying time. When you are awakened by the dancing spots of light on the rock wall, the sandstone is dyed honey. Old Jack stands at the entrance of the cave, holding a kangaroo leather water bag. The water drops, leaking from his fingers, are like a handful of broken diamonds, reflecting a mini rainbow on the spiral rock wall, just enough to cover the ochre-red python coiled in an H-shaped shape. Its head is resting on the end of its tail, and a few dried eucalyptus leaves are stuck between its scales, just like bookmarks that are casually clipped into the pages of a book when taking a nap. Good morning. Last night I snored like a kangaroo stamping its feet. He shook his beard covered with morning dew, and the water bag made a unique squeaking sound of old leather, and the totem pattern on the leather surface was faintly visible in the morning light. Do you see this big guy swallowing its tail? The GPS navigation of our ancestors is much more reliable than Siri. At least it won't pretend to be dumb in heavy rain. I still remember the embarrassing incident when your phone lost contact at Uluru last time. When the light spots slide across the scales of the giant python, you can finally see the secrets embedded in the diamond grids. The tiny mica flakes are hidden in the ochre-red pigment, and the morning light passes by and creates silver-blue ripples, as if someone has rubbed the Milky Way in the southern hemisphere into the rock. The edges of each scale are engraved with extremely fine water ripples, and you can feel the graininess of sandpaper when you touch it with your fingertips, as if the giant python will shake its body at any time and shake off the starlight. The snake's head is facing the crack, deep in the cave, and the ding-dong sound of falling water drops crawls along the stone wall, knocking out an ethereal beat in the silent cave. Old Jack poked your stiff shoulder with a branch. Do you know why the rainbow serpent always coils by the water? In our creation story, the place where its tail swept over cracked the canyon, and the spit became a river. A true prehistoric water conservancy engineer, and it also has a built-in filter to pee the river into an S shape, which is much more sophisticated than your drone aerial photography. Mainstream historical knowledge. The rainbow serpent is the creation deity of the Australian Aboriginals. It has different skins in the rock paintings of different tribes. The Kimberley version loves to live next to puddles, and its scales are dotted with clamshell fragments. The Arnhem Land version has stolen crocodile teeth and emu feathers, and has a few tufts of plaster hair on its head. Archaeologists say that these fancy shapes actually hide the memory of the continent's disguise. After the last ice age, when the sea level rose and submerged the land, the rainbow serpent left a new outfit on the rocks. 40,000 years earlier than the Game of Thrones you are following. You squat down and find that the 7 white dots below the snake's head are arranged along the curve of the rock wall, like dice flicked by a giant, and each dot has a tiny quartz crystal in the center. Old Jack took out his phone and opened the star map app. The blue light of the screen reflected the smile lines at the corners of his eyes. There was a faded rainbow snake sticker on the phone case. See, this string of dots is aimed at the tail of the Southern Cross, and the snake's head always faces the direction of the sun on the winter solstice. In 1998, an astronomy geek insisted that this was an ancient calendar, but the elders retorted, "You look at the phone screen, we look at the stone stars, we all look at the time, who doesn't have a smart device? It's just that our device can withstand 40,000 sunrises and sunsets." Water seeping from the cracks in the rocks accumulated into a small silver plate under the snake's body. A few eucalyptus leaves floated on the water. When your fingertips passed over the water, rainbow light suddenly climbed up to your nails. It was the mica flakes that were causing trouble. Those tiny crystals refracted a colorful halo in the sun, as if the entire rainbow snake had lived in your fingernails. Old Jack took out a small glass bottle like a magician. The golden red powder shone like fine sand in the morning light, and the bottle mouth was stained with brown eucalyptus honey. "Try it." The same ochre powder as the rainbow snake, mixed with eucalyptus honey, can relieve coughs. Don't worry, we only pick up the dandruff that falls off the stones themselves, unlike some experts who use small brushes to scrape the murals, just like pulling the hair of the ancients, and may even steal the hair dye of our ancestors. Little known fact: some of the rainbow serpent rock paintings contain natural magnetite. If you approach them with a compass, the needle will shake as if it has had too much, as if it is greeting the ancient gods. Some scholars speculate that the ancients secretly installed a navigation chip in the myth, so that the rock paintings can be used to worship gods and point the way. When a hunter gets lost in a rainstorm, he only needs to get close to the rock wall with the rainbow serpent painted on it, and the abnormal swing of the compass will point to the direction of the water source, which is equivalent to tattooing Google Maps in the creation story. And you don't have to worry about your phone running out of power. You suddenly notice a new scar on the snake's tail, like a scab, and the surrounding rocks are glowing unnaturally. Old Jack's voice sank, and his fingers gently stroked the scar. In 1962, a young man practiced with a shotgun and broke the tip of the rainbow snake's tail. Now the tribe is still arguing about whether to use modern pigments to repair the painting. You say, "These old breathing stones, do you think it looks better with scars, or inject hyaluronic acid to look younger?" In fact, in our eyes, every crack is a signature of time, just like the scratches on your phone case, hiding a unique story. When we emerged from the cave, the midday sun had tanned a flat-topped mountain into a caramel color, and the eucalyptus trees in the distance were steaming minty mist in the heat wave. Old Jack pointed to the winding river at the foot of the mountain. The river water was glittering in the S-shaped river bend, and occasionally a pelican skimmed across the water, drawing ripples on the river surface. Geologists say that it was the mark left by the rolling of the rainbow snake. Look at each scale on the rock painting. It faces the shallows and deep pools in the river. Scholars are still arguing about whether this is a coincidence, or did our ancestors draw the entire continent on the stone map? Maybe under each scale there is a whisper of "there are fish here." The afternoon heat wave baked the sandstone hot. When Old Jack took you into the caves of Kakadu, you ran into a silent anatomy class head-on. 5 kangaroos were skinned of fur, and the ribs were like a disassembled wooden comb, each one clearly arranged, the red heart beating in the chest cavity. The intestines rolled into a spiral, as if they would slide out of the body in the next second. And even the fine ochre lines in the blood vessels could be seen. Don't be afraid. This is the biology textbook of our ancestors. He fanned the hot air with the smell of earth, with his straw hat, and the shadow of the hat swayed on the kangaroo's heart, like a small fan, and there were a few strands of kangaroo hair sewn on the edge of the straw hat. It's 5,000 years earlier than CT scan, and there is no need to take radiation, and pregnant women can see it. Unlike your hospital, you have to wait in line for 2 hours for an examination. You stare at the spiral intestine in the kangaroo's chest, and find that the end of each rib is dotted with small white dots, like pearl milk tea beads strung on bones. If you look closely, you can also see the extremely thin charcoal lines between the dots, as if recording the ups and downs of breathing. Old Jack took out a kangaroo skeleton model from his canvas bag, and the plastic bones collided. There was a faded note on the model that read, "Archaeological excavation in 1993. Look carefully. The number of ribs in the rock painting is exactly the same as that of a real kangaroo. The 3 extra lines on the heart are said by zoologists to be the ripples of the heartbeat. A prehistoric electrocardiogram, or a hand-painted book, with color pictures. Each arc hides the ancestors' amazement at life." Mainstream historical knowledge point. X-ray rock paintings in Arnhem Land depict the interior view of animals, with kangaroo hearts, crocodile intestines, and fish swim bladders, all spread out on the rocks. Archaeologists found prints of human palms overlapping animal organs in the paintings, with the palm prints so clear that you can see the lifeline. It is speculated that the ancients were performing hunting rituals. Maybe touching the paintings can telepathically communicate with the prey, just like the tactile feedback when you play VR games, except that our equipment is breathing rock. When you look closely, you will find a miniature palm print hidden in the uterus of a kangaroo, with stars dotted between the fingers, and tiny clamshell fragments embedded in the center of the stars, which shimmered faintly under the flashlight, like a handful of fluorescent powder. Old Jack suddenly smiled with wrinkles, and fine sand fell into the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. See? Prehistoric B ultrasound photos. The elders of the tribe said that pregnant women can feel fetal movement by putting their hands here, just like putting their hands on the belly of time. Science says it is the conduction of rock temperature. But who doesn't want to believe that this is the resonance of life 5,000 years ago? It's more romantic than staring at the little blue dots on the electronic screen, right? At least every star here is a lamp lit by the ancestors for their unborn children. In the pit in the corner of the rock wall, half a tortoise shell, coated with plaster, was exposed among the broken bones, and the edge was still stained with brown paste. If you get close, you can smell a faint smell of oil. It is the smell of kangaroo fat, mixed with ochre. Old Jack used a branch to poke it twice, and a few strands of kangaroo hair appeared under the tortoise shell, like a brush rubbed with paint. Ancient palate. The Aborigines boiled kangaroo fat into oil, mixed it with ochre and charcoal, and applied it on the rock wall. It is more durable than matte foundation, and it will not fade after 5,000 years of wind and rain. But it is troublesome to remove makeup. You have to use eucalyptus leaves for 3 days, and you have to use the songs of your ancestors as makeup remover. It is more difficult than removing waterproof mascara. Maybe you can learn an ancient song by the way. Little knowledge. These anatomical drawings are not completely realistic. The intestines of crocodiles are drawn in spiral patterns, which look very much like the foam you stir when you drink coffee. The heart of kangaroos has a wing structure, as if it will jump out of the chest and fly into the sky in the next second. Some scholars say that this is the ancients drawing the soul form of animals, drawing biology and metaphysics into the same drawing. They believe that the flesh and soul of animals are like paint and rocks, always closely dependent on each other, which is equivalent to adding a magic filter to the anatomy class, allowing science and mythology to dance on the rock. You suddenly found a blurry human footprint in the crocodile's stomach, with dark red paint seeping out of the edges. The rocks around the footprints were darker in color, as if soaked in tears. Old Jack lowered his voice and his eyes became serious. In 1987, human bones were dug out from here. There were crocodile tooth marks on the ribs, and half a stone flake with a rainbow snake painted on it was placed next to the skull. Scholars have been arguing over whether this is a warning painting of a hunter being killed, or a mysterious ritual of human-animal symbiosis. You see, our ancestors understood long ago that the food chain is never a one-way street. Maybe the painting contains a survival philosophy of respect. Every bite of food, when you stare at the heart of the prey is also staring at your soul. As the sunset dyed the cave a honey color, Old Jack pointed to the reflective spot on the kangaroo's heart. It was a quartz sand embedded in the pigment, shining like a small sun at this moment. See that quartz sand? When the full moon rises to the entrance of the cave, it will bend the moonlight into an arrow, pointing directly to the heart. Imagine that hunters 5,000 years ago gathered around a fire, watching the heart on the rock light up in the moonlight, the light and shadow of the flames wandering between the ribs, as if the whole kangaroo came alive. That is a real immersive class, much more serious than watching documentaries on Fast Forward. Right, they read Life in the Firelight and wrote Ore on the Rock.
You touch the protruding ribs on the rock paintings, and suddenly feel that these exposed internal organs are not anatomical diagrams, but love letters written by our ancestors to nature. Every mark is a pen tip, every drop of paint is ink, and they have integrated their gratitude to the kangaroos and their awe of life into these seemingly rough lines. When old Jack put away his straw hat, his shadow just happened to lie on the kangaroo's heart, as if gently embraced by 10,000 years of time. Those heartbeats carved into the rock are now following the grain of the sandstone and slowly seeping into the warmth of your palm, as if saying, we have never left, but just changed the way to coexist with this land.
Before the morning dew rolls off the grass, old Jack is poking your sneakers on the moisture-proof mat with a branch. The eucalyptus leaves at the tip of the branch fall on the shoe surface. Hurry up and put on your plastic kangaroo leather boots. Today I'll take you to see the prehistoric Olympics. The kangaroos on the rock wall run faster than your Bolt, but they don't wear gold thread shoes. The edges of the canvas bag he was carrying were polished to a shine, and a few dried kangaroo paw prints slipped out of the side pockets. The shadows cast in the morning light was surprisingly similar to the retro logo of a sports brand, as if time had tied a playful knot here. When you turn the third rock corner, you almost have your flashlight knocked off by a reddish-brown kangaroo that jumps towards you. The kangaroo's hind legs are split into 3 overlapping arcs, and each muscle line looks like it has been kissed by the wind god. The waves of its tail are embedded with dots of white mica, which flicker in the light beam, as if it will jump out of the rock wall at any time. Its front paws are in a grasping posture, and the fingertips are hooked with grains of quartz sand. The light spots refracted by the sand grains are beating in the palm of its hand, just like the nails of an athlete digging into the track when starting a race. Even the nervous sweat glands are lightly dotted with charcoal pencils by our ancestors. See the split hind legs? Old Jack pointed at the radial marks on the kangaroo's feet with his straw hat. The shadow of the straw braid fell right in the center of the footprint, forming a natural scope. Our ancestors' high-speed cameras had 0.1 second of motion decomposition for each arc, 10,000 years earlier than the slow-motion photography on your mobile phone, and there was no need to worry about insufficient memory. They even marked the movement trajectory of each muscle fiber, which was much more detailed than the 3D animation on your fitness apps. Mainstream historical knowledge point. The dynamic hunting rock paintings in Arnhem Land are good at capturing the moments of animals. Running kangaroos are often decomposed into 3-5 overlapping bodies, and jumping crocodiles will grow after image tails. Even the direction of the scales flipping is as accurate as a frame of animation. Archaeologists have found through carbon-14 dating that this type of rock paintings appeared after the end of the last ice age 12,000 years ago. At that time, giant animals gradually disappeared, and humans had to study more efficient hunting techniques. It is equivalent to making Animal World into a comic strip, and every page hides the wisdom of survival. You squat down, with your nose almost touching the rock wall, and find that the kangaroo's footprints are engraved with extremely fine spiral patterns. The center of each pattern is embedded with black charcoal particles, like a handful of mini microphones. The moment your fingertips touch it, you can feel a slight vibration, like stepping on a massager that is set to mute, or like hearing the heartbeat of the earth. Thousands of years ago, old Jack suddenly took out his sports bracelet and shook it, and the heart rate curve on the screen was jumping. Don't be surprised. These are footstep resonance symbols. Modern acoustic experts have found that when people step barefoot under the corresponding rock paintings, the frequency of rock vibration is consistent with the ground tremor. When the kangaroo runs, our ancestors have long turned hunting into an immersive VR experience, and even the footsteps are equipped with surround stereo for you, which is much more exciting than listening to white noise with noise-cancelling headphones. Little known fact: the pigments of some dynamic rock paintings are mixed with broken glass meteorites, which were extraterrestrial visitors that fell on the Australian continent 50,000 years ago. When exposed to direct sunlight, these tiny meteorite fragments will produce the Tyndall effect, making a hazy halo appear around the running animals, as if they have their own speed effects. In 1974, a tourist saw such rock paintings near Uluru, and mistakenly thought they were traces of a UFO landing. He almost called the alien rescue team, but the local elders still laugh at him, compared to you shouting "come on" to your phone screensaver. Our ancestors directly let the rocks teach you how to chase kangaroos, and even the special effects are all natural. There are several oval stone flakes piled in the pit below the rock wall. Each flake is engraved with a simple drawing of a kangaroo jumping. The lines are rough, but full of movement. There are fine teeth marks on the edges, as if they have been bitten and pondered countless times. Old Jack picked up a piece with a branch, and the stone flakes showed a light ochre red in the sun. An ancient game controller. The tribal children practiced predicting the jumping trajectory of kangaroos by throwing stones, and the tooth marks were left when they bit the stones and counted. It's much more hardcore than you playing Animal Crossing to practice fishing skills. At least you won't catch shoes by mistake. Every throw is a real survival training. You suddenly notice a fuzzy finger mark at the end of the kangaroo's tail, which is half a degree lighter than the surrounding color, as if he suddenly changed his mind while painting, or as if it was a gentle kiss left by time. Old Jack's voice is full of laughter, as if he is telling a small episode spanning thousands of years. Did you see that regret? In 2015, a painter insisted that it was the undo key of prehistoric artists, but the elders of the tribe said that it was the mark of rain when the paint was not dry. You see, even nature is teaching us that perfectionism is not as good as letting nature take its course. Anyway, looking back 40,000 years later, all regrets are the filter of time, which makes the story more real and warm. When you leave the cave, the midday sun is gilding the running kangaroo, and the mica particles are glimmering on the arc of its legs, just like the reflective strips on athletes. In the grass in the distance, real kangaroos are jumping in the same arc, and their shadows overlap with the rock paintings, as if time and space are quietly resonating at this moment. Old Jack suddenly pointed at them. The jumping trajectory of the living kangaroos is exactly the same as the rock paintings. The academic community is still arguing whether this is because our ancestors observed it in detail, or they have reached some kind of tacit understanding with the kangaroos. Maybe these runners on the rocks have never stopped, but just changed dimensions, continuing to jump in time, passing on the wisdom of survival from generation to generation. The afternoon sun warms the sandstone like a freshly baked honey cake. When Old Jack takes you into a cave covered with vines, something suddenly falls on your head. You reach out in a hurry and catch a round macadamia nut, the shell still warm from the sun. Looking up, on the ochre-red rock wall, clusters of nuts are painted in the shape of gears. Each fruit is covered with a ring of different colors, green for immaturity and ochre for maturity. The weirdest thing is that a nut has half a human finger painted on it, with nut kernels stuck in the cracks of the nails, as if the painter had just peeled the nut and left the fragments of life on the rock wall forever. Welcome to the prehistoric food processing factory. Old Jack catches a falling nut and throws it twice in his palm. The nuts collide and make a crisp sound. The food expiration date labels of our ancestors are 5,000 years earlier than the best before labels you buy in supermarkets. There is no need to worry about the ink fading. Each ring is a stamp of time. You look closely and find that there are spiral lines carved under the nuts, like a time tunnel. leading to the clouds. Each circle of lines is separated by different animal patterns: kangaroo footprints, emu feathers, crocodile scales, which look like a code book written with animal footprints, and each page contains the secret language of nature. Old Jack suddenly took out a notebook from his canvas bag. The edges of the paper were frayed by rain. He turned to the page with concentric circles. Modern botanists have discovered that the number of these rings corresponds to the annual rings of the macadamia tree, and the animal patterns represent the climate of that year. Years with more kangaroo footprints represent drought, and years with more crocodile scales represent heavy rain. It is equivalent to carving the Journal of Agricultural Meteorology into the snack packaging. Each pattern is a dialogue between the ancestors and the land. Mainstream historical knowledge point. In the rock art of southeastern Australia, symbols of plant and animal cycles are common, such as leaves that change according to the seasons, fruits that mature month by month, and even the texture of the bark is meticulously depicted. Archaeologists have found ancient carbonized seeds and stone tools around these rock paintings, and speculated that they were survival manuals for the Aboriginal people to record the cycle of food resources. Compared with modern calendars, they are more practical and can be eaten. Every mark is to ensure that they will not forget the taste of the harvest during the long dry season. In the shallow groove in the corner of the rock wall, 12 pebbles are neatly arranged, each with a different plant pattern engraved on it, ranging from sprouting seedlings to withered branches. And even the veins on the leaves can be seen, like a miniature plant specimen. Old Jack flicked the stones with his toes twice, and the sound of the stones colliding startled two sparrows napping on the rock paintings. Ancient calendar. Each stone represents a month, corresponding to the harvesting period of different plants. You use the mobile phone memo to record payday. Our ancestors used stones to record nut ripening period, and never forgot to charge. Each stone is a memo of time engraved with gratitude to the land. Little known fact: some plant period rock paintings use fluorescent pigments, which are made by mixing the luminescent enzyme in fireflies with gypsum. On full moon nights, they emit a faint green glow, just illuminating the location of ripe fruits, like a natural nightlight installed on the rocks. In 1999, a biologist squatted in a cave for 3 months, and mistakenly thought he had discovered a new species of luminous plants, until one night, he saw the rock paintings suddenly light up under the moonlight, and then he suddenly realized it. Now he still has a piece of eyelashes dyed green by fluorescence in his research notes. He was severely fooled by the cold joke of his ancestors, but it also allows us to see the romantic poetry hidden in the wisdom of the ancient. You suddenly find a fuzzy lip print under a bunch of ripe nuts. The edge of the ochre red pigment has a faint tooth mark, as if someone has put their lips here and gently kissed the taste of time. Old Jack suddenly lowered his voice, as if telling a secret that spanned thousands of years. In 1982, a female skeleton was dug up here, and the burial object was half a can of macadamia oil. Ochre components were detected in the tooth enamel. The academic community is still arguing whether this was accidentally ingested pigment, or some kind of mysterious ritual of remembering the season with taste. Maybe our ancestors' foodie attributes have left DNA traces on the rocks, and every bite of food is the most intimate dialogue with the land. When the sunset dyed the nut ring on the rock painting amber, Old Jack picked up a real nut that had fallen on the edge of the frame and cracked it with a stone. The creamy aroma immediately filled the cave. Smell it, it tastes creamy, the same as the ochre red on the rock painting. Do you know why our ancestors painted ripe nuts red? The iron in ochre can delay the oxidation of the nut kernel, which is equivalent to a natural preservative. Even the pigment is food grade. He stuffed the nut into his mouth, and the crunch sound echoed in the cave, startling a burst of fine rock powder, like time coughing gently, and like our ancestors in the distant past, whispering to us now, try it. This is a gift from the land. You touch the concave and convex growth rings on the rock paintings, and suddenly realize that these symbols are not cold records. but diaries of dialogue between ancestors and the land. Each circle is a bend to pick, and each animal pattern is a game with the climate. When the chewing sound of Old Jack mixes with the rustling of eucalyptus trees in the distance, you suddenly feel that one afternoon 40,000 years ago, there may have been an Aboriginal child who gnawed nuts and drew tender fruits on the rock wall, leaving the expectation of a good harvest and the love of the land forever in the warm sandstone, so that we can still feel the temperature of time thousands of years later. The midday sun baked the cave into a warm yellow color. Old Jack suddenly raised the kangaroo leather water bag. The totem pattern on the water bag was clearly visible in the sun, like an ancient navigation code. He tilted the water bag, letting the water flow in an arc on the rock wall. 7 white dots appeared in the watermarks, forming a pattern that was the Southern Cross. In the center of each star was a tiny crystal. Those crystals were sharp and angular. In the sun, they refracted the light into a miniature rainbow, which sprinkled on the canoe pattern, engraved below, as if covering the canoe with a colorful sail. Congratulations, you have found the GPS satellite positioning system of your ancestors. He wiped the watermarks on his chin. The leather of the water bag exuded a faint eucalyptus scent, mixed with the smell of sunshine. These 7 stars correspond to the navigation points in reality. From the water source to the prey migration route, everything is hidden in it. It is 40,000 years earlier than the Beidou navigation in your mobile phone. There is no need to worry about signal shielding. After all, our satellites are stars that are always hanging in the sky. You look down along the star map and find that there are dense waves engraved under the canoe, and different animal symbols are sandwiched between every 3 waves. Shark teeth are so sharp that you can see the tooth patterns representing reefs. Turtle shells are engraved with patterns like annual rings, representing shallows. The most special thing is that a pelican with its wings spread is painted on the crest of a wave, with its beak facing the light spots refracted by the crest as if it will dive into the water to catch fish in the next second. Old Jack took out a paper map and spread it on the rock. The edge of the map was curled and there were a few traces of being wet by rain. His fingertips ran across the west coast of Australia. In 1983, fishermen discovered the remains of a 40,000-year-old canoe at the corresponding position of the star map. The engravings on the hull are exactly the same as the wave patterns in the rock paintings, and you can even see traces of repairs. Our ancestors had already engraved the logbook on the stars and rocks, which is much more reliable than your travel notes and posts on WeChat moment. At least it will not be swallowed by the server, and every mark is a navigation coordinate written with life. Mainstream historical knowledge point. Rock star maps in coastal areas of Australia often combine the Southern Cross, the Milky Way and the coastline topography, and the positions of stars correspond to real landmarks. The star map rock paintings discovered by archaeologists on the Cape York Peninsula accurately marked safe routes at high tide. Each turning point on those route maps corresponds to coral reefs, or reefs on the seabed, proving that the Aboriginals mastered celestial navigation technology after the last ice age, thousands of years earlier than European nautical charts. Their nautical charts were drawn with stars and rocks. On the stone platform in the corner of the rock wall, there are 7 polished pebbles, each engraved with a different constellation: the Southern Cross, Orion, Scorpio, and the edges still have traces of worn knots, which are the marks of the ancestors' fingers grinding for a lifetime. Old Jack picked up a piece with a branch, and there were still tiny shell fragments embedded in the marks on the stone. Ancient navigation chip. The elders of the tribe would string these stones into necklaces, hang them around their neck, and compare them with the stars when they got lost. You wear smartwatches to count steps. Our ancestors wore star necklaces to see the way, and the battery life is a lifetime. No need to charge, just look up at the sky. Little known fact: the crystals in some star chart rock paintings contain natural magnetite. and the distribution of the magnetite is surprisingly consistent with the direction of the Earth's magnetic field. In 1942, a pilot lost his way in a rainstorm, and the plane's instrument panel was spinning wildly. Just when he was desperate, he saw the flash of the rock painting, and mistakenly thought it was an enemy signal, so he prepared for an emergency landing. Later he found that it was the crystal that helped him correct his course. The navigation system of our ancestors even calculated weather interference in advance, and it had more gentle guidance from the Earth than modern navigation. You suddenly find a tiny fingerprint mark on the edge of the star map, embedded between two stars. The fingerprint is so shallow that it is almost invisible, as if someone pressed it lightly with their little finger, and the temperature of the fingertip seems to remain on the rock. Old Jack smiled with wrinkles on his face. In 2005, an archaeologist's daughter was playing in front of the rock painting. She was wearing pink sandals and squatting on the ground to look at the stars. She accidentally rubbed her fingerprint on the protective coating. Now the children in the tribe say that it is the belly button of the star, a secret code left by the ancestors for future children. They will talk to the fingerprint, as if they are chatting with a child 40,000. The academic community is still debating whether this modern mark should be repaired, but we think that rocks are originally breathing storybooks. It is good to have a few more pages of new notes, which is the baton of time. When the setting sun gilded the Southern Cross, the light refracted by the crystal just fell on the canoe in the rock painting, as if the ancient ship was about to set sail, and the direction of the bow was exactly the direction of home. Old Jack pointed to the sparkling sea in the distance, and the waves hit the reefs, making a rhythmic sound. See those white waves? Each star in the star map corresponds to the location of the coral reefs on the seabed, and the bow of the canoe always points to the safest channel at high tide. The academic community is still arguing whether this is a coincidence, or our ancestors have already carved the entire ocean into the starry sky. Maybe in their eyes the sky and the earth are originally a connected navigation map. The stars are punctuation, the rocks are text, and we are readers who are always on the road. You touch the uneven crystals on the star map, and suddenly feel that these stones are not cold, celestial marks, but flashlights handed to the future by our ancestors. They have melted their awe of the ocean and their understanding of the starry sky into these 7 small crystals. When old Jack put away his water bag, the reflection of the crystals fell right into his pupils, as if hiding the starlight of the entire southern hemisphere. And the star map on the rock wall is using the light of 40,000 years ago to gently illuminate the lines in your palm, as if saying, when you get lost, look up at the stars. We are always here, just like the rocks. Remember every mark, and the stars remember every twinkle. Before the morning mist has dispersed, old Jack squatted beside the stone mill in the middle of the cave, beating the ochre ore with a wooden stick wrapped in kangaroo skin. The dark red powder fell on the millstone like a handful of sparks, and the marks on the edge of the stone mill were still embedded with vermilion that had not faded for thousands of years, just like the old rouge that Grandma kept at the bottom of the box. When the wooden stick collided with the ore, it made a dull dung-dung sound, which scared away the blue-winged locusts that were resting on the edge of the millstone. The wind brought by their wings carried ochre powder as fine as smoke, which gently fell on the back of your hand, like the gentle kiss left by your ancestors. Do you know what this is? Our ancestors' cosmetics processing factory. He blew away the stone powder on the wooden stick, revealing the spiral pattern carved on the stick head. The pattern was exactly the same as the navigation symbol on the rock wall. It is 40,000 years older than your girl's beauty eggs, and the raw materials have a sun protection factor of SPF 1000+. After all, it is dug out from the red soil pile that has been exposed to the sun for billions of years. Smell it. This ochre has a bit of rust, mixed with the eucalyptus scent in the morning mist, which is much more natural than your fancy perfume. You get close to the grinding wheel, and find that the edge is engraved with crater-like grooves. Each groove is embedded with minerals of different colors: ochre, milky white, carbon black, like a pallet overturned by a giant. You can even see plant fibers, as thin as hair mixed in the pigments. They are kangaroo hair, or emu feathers, added during the blending process. Old Jack suddenly took out his mobile phone and opened the shopping app. An advertisement for mineral powder of a beauty brand popped up on the screen. The model's face was polished like a smooth pebble. See, the natural mineral makeup that you modern people are promoting has long been played by our ancestors, and each can of powder is engraved with instructions for use. The 3 notches on the grinding wheel represent use with caution on rainy days, and the 5 dots represent suitable for application when hunting, which is much easier than reading the ingredient list. Do you know why it is engraved here? Because our ancestors took notes while grinding the pigments, unlike you who have to find a small notebook specifically. Mainstream historical knowledge point. In rock art sites in Central Australia, matching pigment processing tools are often found. Granite grinding discs, kangaroo leather mixing bowls, and quartz grinding rods. Archaeologists dug up a complete color palette set from 15,000 years ago in a cave in Kakadu. The residues in the grooves of the grinding discs show that the ancients would adjust the pigment formula according to the season, adding honey to increase viscosity in the dry season, and propolis to waterproof in the rainy season, which is more sophisticated than your oil control moisturizing foundation. Look at the dents on this grinding disc. The deep places are often ground with carbon black, and the shallow places are ground with white plaster. Each trace is a record of the ancestors' use, which is much more real than the usage time statistics of your mobile phone app. In the pit below the millstone, more than 20 hollow eggshells are neatly stacked. The inside of each eggshell is painted with different shades of red, from coral orange to wine red, just like the color test card of modern lipstick. Old Jack picked up an emu eggshell with a branch. The fingerprints on the inside of the eggshell were so clear that you could see the pattern of the eggshell and even distinguish which was the thumb and which was the index finger. Ancient color test card. Women in the tribe would dip their fingertips into the paint and leave marks on the eggshell. The one with the most positive color would be placed next to the rock painting. You beauty bloggers shoot color test videos, but our ancestors directly engraved the color test process into history. Every fingerprint is a thumbs up from time. Guess what? They would also breathe on the eggshell to see if the color would change in the heat. It was much more troublesome than taking color test photos under different lights, but they also put more effort into it. Little knowledge. Some pigments are mixed with nanoscale gold foil fragments. Those natural gold powders from the riverbed can make the ochre red glow at a certain angle, like a retro filter for rock paintings. In 1996, when geologists were analyzing pigments, they accidentally discovered that the arrangement of gold foil was consistent with the direction of local gold veins. It is speculated that the ancients would choose the origin of pigments based on the metal content in the rocks, which is equivalent to needing the geological exploration report into the palette. Each stroke of pigment is an in-depth interpretation of the land. Maybe when they choose pigments they also look at the birth date of the stone, which is more strict than you choose lipstick color based on skin color. You suddenly notice a gray patch on the edge of the millstone, as if it had been gnawed by time, and the surrounding scratches are still embedded with modern cement fragments. Old Jack gently strokes the patch with his fingers, and his fingertips run across the junction of cement and rock, and he can feel the obvious temperature difference. In the 1960s, the road construction team used cement to patch this millstone. As a result, 3 months later, native thyme grew in the cement cracks. Now the elders in the tribe say that this is the ancestors protesting. Our millstone does not need modern patches. The land will heal itself. The academic community is still arguing whether this piece of cement should be removed. But we think this scar is pretty cool. Just like when you wear ripped jeans, the torn part just reveals the skin of the earth. You see, the roots of time have pushed cracks out of the cement. In a few years, maybe the cement should give way to plants. When the sun climbed into the cave, the ochre powder on the millstone suddenly flashed with fine gold, as if someone had scattered a handful of broken stars. Old Jack pointed to the concentric circles in the center of the millstone. There was a tiny pit at the center of the circle, just big enough to hold a macadamia nut. See, this is a calendar. Each ring represents a season, and the notches on the ring are the dates of prey migration. You use your mobile phone memo to record anniversaries, but our ancestors used millstones to record the red kangaroo estrus period, and never forget it. After all, every time you grind pigment, you are talking to time. He suddenly knocked on the millstone with a wooden stick, and the buzzing sound resounded through the cave, startling a few sparrows that were napping on the rock paintings. The sound was mixed with the fine dust of ochre, as if there was such a sound one morning 40,000 years ago, accompanied by the songs of the ancestors, gently echoing among the rock. You close your eyes and imagine the craftsmen 10,000 years ago, grinding pigments while humming hunting songs, and the songs slowly melted into the heartbeat of the earth as the millstone turned. You touch the shiny grooves on the grinding wheel, and suddenly realize that these tools are not cold stones, but the diaries of your ancestors. Each mark is a breath, and each grain of pigment is a story. When old Jack's stick falls again and the ochre powder rises, you seem to see the craftsman 10,000 years ago smiling at the grinding wheel, grinding his love for life and gratitude for the land into this fine powder, so that we can still feel the temperature of time thousands of years later. The kangaroo hair and emu feathers mixed in the pigment, as well as the pebbles that accidentally fell into the grinding wheel, are all fragments of the lives of our ancestors, just like the daily photos in your mobile phone album, recording the most real year. At the darkest moment before dawn, old Jack takes you to the deepest part of the cave. When the flashlight beam sweeps across the entire rock wall, you suddenly hold your breath. On the 20-meter-long rock wall, Wandjina's eyelashes are still covered with night dew. The scales of the rainbow snake are gleaming, and the dancing human figure is looming in the shadows. Even the spiral navigation symbol you saw first is now dyed furry by the morning mist, like an open book of time, with each page filled with the secret language of the earth. When the flashlight passes through Wandjina's eyes, you seem to see his pupils trembling slightly, as if he is saying hello to you. The night dew hanging on his eyelashes is gleaming in the beam, just like the stars in his eyes. This is our rock library, old Jack said in a much softer voice than usual, as if he was afraid of waking up his dreaming ancestors. From creation myths to life guides, from weather forecasts, star maps, they are all hidden in these crooked lines. Look at the spiral pattern with 7 dots. Do you understand now? That is the projection of the Southern Cross. The small fish next to it is not a decoration, but means follow this direction, and you will find the river mouth in the rainy season. The rock paintings of our ancestors have never been works of art, but living survival manuals. Every mark you touch is a letter they wrote to their descendants, and the words are full of wisdom for living. Mainstream historical knowledge points. Comprehensive research on rock art sites shows that the rock art of Australian Aborigines constitutes a complete knowledge system, covering astronomy, meteorology, biology, geography, and even early philosophical thinking. These rock paintings are not independent paintings, but interrelated symbol systems, like ancient hypertext links. A spiral pattern may point to water sources, seasons, and myths. At the same time, it needs to be interpreted in context, which is much more complicated than the fragmented information you get from watching short videos. For example, the symbol of a kangaroo and a rainbow snake. The kangaroo represents land, and the rainbow snake represents water sources. Together, it means find kangaroos along the water source, which is equivalent to writing navigation and food guides into a painting. You suddenly find a row of tiny handprints at the bottom of the rock wall, arranged from big to small. The smallest one is only as big as a baby's palm, and there is a crooked star painted on the palm. Old Jack squatted down and compared. His palm just covered the largest palm print, and your palm can fit into the middle one. This is a family's growth record. The largest palm is the grandfather, the middle one is the father, and the smallest is the newborn child. They carved the handprints of 3 generations on the rock, just like you post baby's first walk on WeChat moments. But our friend's circle can be preserved for 40,000 years, and every like is pressed on the stone with fingertips dipped in ochre. You can see that there are deep calluses in the grandfather's palm lines, which are left by grinding stone tools for a lifetime. The father's palm lines are lighter, but there are traces of paint on his fingertips, indicating that he is a rock painting craftsman. The child's palm print is the lightest, and the star is painted crookedly. Maybe it was painted by the father holding his little hand. Little known fact: in some large rock art groups, paintings from different eras form a dialogue. Hunters 5,000 years ago added a kangaroo to the rainbow serpent. Elders 300 years ago added a drop of rainwater to Wandjina's feet, and even modern children can be seen using crayons to draw a small sun on the protective glass. These follow-up posts across time and space make rock art a never-ending narrative. Just like you constantly update entries on Wikipedia, but our entries are engraved on the earth. Look at the small sun drawn by a modern child. Although the lines are immature, it is just drawn on the top of Wandjina's head, like a new hat for the god. Maybe Wandjina likes this new decoration. When the first rays of sunlight climbed up the rock wall, all the symbols were suddenly gilded. Wandjina's eyelashes shook off dewdrops. The scales of the rainbow serpent shone, and even the smallest palm prints were as bright as fire. Old Jack turned off the flashlight, and in the morning light, you saw his shadow stretched out and projected on the rock wall, overlapping with those ancient human outlines, as if he was also part of the rock painting story. It's time to say goodbye. But do you know, these rocks have never really been silent. When it rains, the rain will flow into the millstone along Wandjina's eyelashes, making a ding-dong sound. When the wind blows, the spiral pattern will whistle to guide the lost kangaroos. Even every mark you touch is quietly transmitting warmth to your palm, as if the ancestors are gently patting your shoulder and saying, "Child, take your time. We have already carved the answer in stone." You touch the warm ochre on the rock wall, and suddenly realize that this 10-day journey is not to find ancient symbols, but to witness a dialogue that spans thousands of years. The ancestors used paint to communicate with rocks, and used marks to communicate with time, and now, the warmth of your palm is becoming the continuation of this dialogue. Old Jack took out a cowhide notebook, turned to a blank page, and handed you a charcoal pencil, which still had the warmth of his palm on the pen. Want to leave a follow post? Don't worry about drawing it crookedly. People 40,000 years later will know that this was a night in 2025, and a child was here, saying hello to the stars, rocks and ancestor. You took the charcoal pencil and gently drew a handprint with a star on the palm on the paper, just like the smallest handprint on the rock wall, except that your star is drawn with a modern charcoal pencil, but it also carries the warmth and respect for this land. Now dim the lights and turn on a small fan as background music. You can close your eyes and imagine yourself still lying on the moisture-proof mat in the cave. The voice of Old Jack gradually becomes blurred, and the symbols on the rock wall dance gently in the moonlight. The starlight from 40,000 years ago is now passing through your eyelids and falling into your palms, like a gentle good night, allowing all the stories to continue to grow in your dreams. When you wake up tomorrow, you may find that the symbols carved on the rocks have quietly settled in your heart, and become the warmest connection between you and this ancient land. As dusk draped the sandstone with an indigo cloak, Old Jack suddenly turned off the flashlight. Hold your breath. 3, 2, 1. In the darkness, you hear a tiny crackling sound coming from the rock wall, like someone unwrapping a star wrapped in candy paper, or like time gently stretching its muscles. When the pupils adapt to the darkness, the entire rock wall glows with a faint green light. Under the moonlight, more than 20 human figures holding hands emerge from the ochre-red background. Their knees are exaggeratedly bent, as if they will jump into reality in the next second. Their arms swing into smooth wavy lines, and the white rings on their ankles flicker with the night wind. Just like modern dancers wearing fluorescent anklets, dancing on the beach, except that their dance floor is the moonlight of fall. Welcome to the prehistoric square dance scene. Old Jack's voice floated from the shadows on the left, startling two moths snapping above the dancers' heads. The wind brought by their wings had a faint smell of phosphorus powder. These fluorescent dancers use luminescent fungi mixed with gypsum powder, which is 30,000 years earlier than the fluorescent paint in your nightclubs. There is no need to worry about ultraviolet allergies. After all, the raw materials of our ancestors' cosmetics come from breathing nature. Do you see the rings on their ankles? They are made of phosphorus powder ground from possum bones for 3 days and 3 nights. On full moon nights, they will flicker to the rhythm of the moonlight, which is equivalent to having their own DJ playing music, and the sound effects are all natural wind sounds and crackling campfires. Mainstream historical knowledge point. Ritual dance rock paintings are common in Arnhem Land and Kimberley. The figures are mostly in linked postures, and the ring-shaped decorations on the ankles and wrists are believed to be related to body painting in sacrificial rituals. Archaeologists found ochre fragments and burnt eucalyptus branches under the feet of some dancers. The branches still have dents made by fingers. It is speculated that in ancient rituals people would dance around the rock paintings on crackling sparks, letting their shadows overlap with the portraits, completing the sacred moment of people dancing with gods, just like embedding themselves in the envy of time. You look closely and find that each dancer's palm is facing the center, with different symbols painted on the palm. The pattern of the kangaroo's paw is so clear that you can see the dimples on the pad, representing strength. The feathers of the emu feathers are so distinct that you can even see the fluff on the feather shaft, representing speed. The palm of the dancer in the center is empty, with only a circle of fingerprints engraved on it. The fingerprints are embedded with tiny quartz sand, as if everyone's handprints are stacked together, and even the traces of sweat glands have been carefully recorded by the ancestors. Old Jack suddenly took out his mobile phone to play electronic dance music. The phone case was covered with a faded fluorescent dancer sticker. The electric sound mixed with the sound of the wind on the rock wall was surprisingly consistent with the rhythm of the dancer's movements, as if the dance beat 30 years ago was reawakening through the mobile phone speaker. Modern musicologists have found that the step frequency corresponding to these dance trajectories is exactly the same as the beat of the traditional Aboriginal ballads, which is equivalent to carving Swan Lake into the rock, and it is a 3D immersive version with built-in surround sound. Little known fact: the pigments of some dance rock paintings contain bioluminescent pigments, which come from a type of luminescent snail that lives in the cracks of eucalyptus bark. The fluorescent mucus on the snail shells needs to be collected on dark and windy nights. The Aborigines will gently brush it with a kangaroo hairbrush, as if tickling the stars. In 1968, an entomologist stayed in front of the rock paintings all night, carrying heavy photographic equipment and staring at the rock wall without blinking. He mistakenly thought he had photographed an alien creature, but the elder pointed at the snail shell and asked with a smile, "You modern people can even glow with your mobile phones, so why can't you understand the romance of stone?" Our ancestors borrowed fluorescence from snails just to let the dance last a little longer in the moonlight. In the shallow pit below the rock wall, 13 kangaroo leg bones are neatly arranged, each with spiral patterns carved in them, the depth of which allows vibrations to revolve in the bone cavity. If you squat down and listen closely, you can hear subtle resonances, like drum beats from afar, or like the earth humming softly. Old Jack tapped the bone array with his toes, and the collision of the kangaroo leather boots and the bones made a crisp sound. Ancient sound equipment. When the dancers stamped their feet, the leg bones would transmit vibrations to the rock wall, causing the fluorescent man in the painting to shake along, much earlier than you wearing bone conduction headphones to listen to music. And the stereo effect depends entirely on natural reverberation. Every stamp of the foot is a love letter to the rock. You suddenly notice a dark-colored incision on the waist of a dancer, like a healed scar, and the fluorescent paint around it is slightly offset, as if the falling rocks, brought by the rainstorm, not only hit the rock painting, but also left a mark in time. Old Jack lowered his voice, as if he was afraid of waking up the sleeping dancer. In 1991, a rainstorm destroyed the top of the cave, and a falling rock hit this painting. Later, The elders of the tribe brought the children to repair it. The children used small brushes, dipped in modern fluorescent paint, to fill the gap, crookedly, and the edges of the paint still had traces of little fingers. Now the academic community is still arguing whether this kind of cross-time and space cooperation is a blasphemy to the rock paintings, or is it proof that rock art is alive? After all, for 40,000 years they have been listened to and responded to, like a storybook that can never be finished, with new authors constantly joining. When the moonlight moved to the top of the dancer's head, the ring-shaped decorations suddenly became as bright as daylight, forming a flowing light band. Like the Milky Way falling on the rock wall, tiny fluorescent particles could be seen floating in the light band, just like stardust in the universe. Old Jack pointed to the end of the light band and said, "Do you see the dancer kneeling on one knee? His shadow will be cast on the central palm print when the moon is full, forming a pattern of holding moonlight." Ancient priests used this to determine the auspicious day for sowing or hunting. It is much more convenient than looking at the almanac or flipping through your phone. You can just look up and ask the stone, and the stone will always give the answer with moonlight.